Hi friends, I'm Liz.
I'm Robbie. Welcome back to our channel Bookworm Couple. Today we're going to do something a little bit different since it is already over halfway through the year, which feels insane. We are going to each be talking about some of our favorite books that we've read this year. We're each going to do 5 and then kind of end with a one dishonorable mention each, our least favorite read so far this year.
We're also not ranking the 5.
No, not just ranking them in any way.
Our 5
I think mine are probably generally going to be in the order I read them just because that's the list
yeah,
I was
that makes
looking
sense.
at.
Sure.
And I also tried to make sure that I wasn't doing... I don't think I've done any that are, like, I don't have 2 that are by the same author. I don't know if
I don't either.
Great, amazing. Do you want to start or shall I?
You go.
Okay, great. So I'll start off with one of the first books I read this year, which was Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I really, really did this. Brandon Sanderson doesn't have a ton of, like, standalones. All of, you know, his most popular works are Mistborn and Stormlight Archive, for great reason. But I always do love some standalone fantasy books. I feel like there aren't as many, and in the fantasy space, people are always obsessed with series, which I am too. I love reading many book series. So it's nice to have a one-off every once in a while, and something so lighthearted. You'll hear it a million times when talking about this book, but it's very, you know, Princess Bride-esque. The tone is like a much more storytelling thing from the point of view kind of Hoyd, which was very interesting and a new kind of narrative take for Sanderson. I really found the entire thing to be delightful. It was a great thing to read early on in the year, and I think it's a great starting place for anyone who is looking to read their first Brandon Sanderson book. But yeah, so that's one of mine. What about you?
Okay. The first book I'm going to talk about is House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. Now, I know this didn't get raucous applause from a lot of the fans. No.
Okay.
But I don't think a lot of the fans are massive Crescent City fans anyways. Crescent City is very different from ACOTAR, which is Sarah J. Maas's probably most famous series, which I loved. But I also really love Crescent City, and I love it for its differences. It is a lot of people, a lot of lore dump, and this book, which is the 3rd book in the Crescent City series, was the same. There was a lot of lore dump, there was a lot of POVs, but it was really fun to be back with these characters and to delve more into this crazy scheme that they've gotten themselves into. I had a grand old time reading it. So for me, it was a 5-star. I was so excited to be back with these characters. I thought the pace was very fast. I thought that the character development was good. I don't think it went where a lot of people wanted it to go, which is why I think a lot of people had some issues. But that's also just my interpretation of why I think a lot of people didn't like it. I had a grand old time. I thought it was very adventurous. I liked some of the new POV characters that we got. I found them some of the most intriguing in the series, and I want more from them. So hopefully we'll get more. That's all.
So my next one is book 4 in the Sun Eater series by Christopher Rocchio, titled Kingdoms of Death.
Of course.
Everyone is gonna say Demon in White. I know this. Most people really love Demon in White. I love Demon in White. Demon in White is fantastic. I personally just... something about Kingdoms of Death has stuck with me more, and the more books I read, the more I realize that, like, that's the real tell for me of a book that I sincerely and dearly loved is something that's really stuck with me, and Kingdoms of Death really has. The series as a whole follows Hadrian Marlowe, also known as the Half-Mortal, in his kind of journey throughout the stars. It is a epic sci-fantasy series, huge in scope. There are like hundreds of years that pass between each book, and it is largely about humanity's battle against an alien race called the Cielsen. It is a fascinating single POV character study of, I believe the author described it as if Darth Vader was doing the right thing, or something along those lines. But anyway, Kingdoms of Death... That
tagline would make me want to read it, for sure.
Kingdoms of Death, to me, was so fascinating because up until that point, Hadrian had basically been an unstoppable force. And in this series, in book 4, Kingdoms of Death, he meets an immovable object, and he's finally stopped. And it's just a deconstruction of a character. There are some of the most heavy emotional beats that you will find in the series. It is not always a fun read. It is rough. Really bad things happen, but it is extremely memorable, and so that is why it is one of my favorite reads of the year.
Okay, yeah. Look at that. Okay, my next 3 I read all within the last month. I had a
Oh, you're doing 3?
No. I'm saying the next 3 on my list.
Oh gosh, wow.
Well, I had a very slow start to the year. I didn't really read a lot at the beginning of the year up until about a month or 2 ago. So, but luckily, I've read a bunch of really good books within that span of time.
Great.
My next book is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. I've seen this all over Bookstagram, and I know the second book came out earlier this year, so it was kind of in the back of my mind that I really wanted to read this book, and I loved it. I thought it was some of the most beautiful writing that I've ever read, and beautiful in a way that was understandable and simplistic but artistic at the same time. It was absolutely stunning. This book focuses in a World War II-esque world, very much that era. You can tell by the way the fashion is described. At least that's kind of how I interpret it. I was like, oh, I got it. I know where we are. But with magic, and focuses on divine rivals.
Yeah.
Watch out. 2 writers that are rivals. There's a lot of twists and turns. There's a lot of lore. There's a lot of gods and gods, not just one, multiple gods and the lore behind them, and a war, and what the like real meaning behind this war is, why it started, and these characters, these 2 writers are in the midst of it trying to get the real story to the people who need it. And I thought it was beautiful. I thought the writing was phenomenal. I loved the 2 main characters. I loved the way it was written. There were passages of it that I have set out and quoted for myself to have forever because they were just so moving and so stunning. It was very much a book by a writer about writers for writers. So because of that, at least that's kind of how I interpreted it. Because of that, there was such beautiful language. It was stunning. I had a great time.
Love that.
5 stars.
So my next one is Ship of Destiny, which is book 3 in the Live Ship Traders trilogy by Robin Hobb, which itself is a part of the larger realm of the Elderlings series, I guess you would call it. It's a bunch of different trilogies and quartets. I believe it's about 16 books total. And this series I had heard amazing things about. It was not what I expected in the end, which is part of why I was so fascinated by it. Largely, the series as a whole follows mostly a family called the Vestrits, and they are a trading family, and they have something called a live ship, which is a ship which that's figurehead comes alive. Magical, very magical. But there are a lot of other inciting incidents around this, and I knew it was kind of like a trading, seafaring, piracy type story, but I didn't really expect to have some of the like most despicable characters I think I may have ever read in anything before. I know when you read Robin Hobb, you expect there to be like beautiful introspective prose, but I didn't really expect so many really horrific things to happen. There were some very intense themes in this, including like a lot of focus on sexual assault, which I was not at all expecting, but it was handled very well, and I have to say it was refreshing to read from a woman's perspective as an author, as opposed to the many times I have read men write about it. But yeah, overall, so trigger warning for that. But overall, what I would say is that this is like a beautiful kind of triumphant look at family, and a large look at like what is more important, intention or results, I guess is some of what I took out of it. I also would say that if you've read the first trilogy, or maybe even just the first book in the realm of the Elderlings, and it wasn't for you, that series is very different than this one, and I would highly recommend you give it a chance. This is a multi-POV story. There's a lot more moving pieces, whereas the first series is much slower and only focused on a single POV. And don't get me wrong, Mist fits a lot, but if that wasn't for you, this might be, so I highly recommend you check it out. So what do you got?
I got. My next one is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I love an Emily Henry book. They are the greatest, just joyful beach reads. She is one of the only authors I think I will consistently read one-off novels from, because I love being lost in a series. I get really sad when my friends are gone. So if I just have one book, a lot of times it like breaks my heart. I've read enough Emily Henry now to kind of be okay with that. This one was so good. This is her most recent novel, focuses on Daphne, who was recently left by her fiance for her fiance's best friend. And then Daphne moves in with her fiance's best friend's ex-boyfriend, Miles.
The drama.
Literally the drama. This one was such an in-your-face drama from the beginning that I just thought it was very comical. I haven't read too much of that from Emily Henry. She usually is kind of more of that, like, slow release of, like, what's the real cusp behind this? Like, why are we reading this? Where's the tension? But this from the get-go was out the gate soap opera drama, but it was phenomenal. I thought Daphne was such a beautiful character. I think Emily Henry writes really normal gals in a most beautiful light, and it just kind of shows us that us on our daily lives are stunning, and her love stories are amazing. They're all a small town. Like, this one was a small town in Michigan, which I grew up in Ohio, so it was very nostalgic to get the, like, small town Michigan beach vibes. The main character is a librarian, which, like, you can't... Come on, you gotta love it. I thought it was phenomenal. This one was an easy 5-star read. I devoured it in, like, 2 days. I love Emily Henry. I wish she would write 1,000 more books.
She probably will.
She probably will. They're all being turned into either a TV series or a movie. Oh, literally every one of her books, I think. Yeah. Anywho, what's your next one?
My next one is Speaking Bones, which is book 4 in the Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu. Okay. Yeah, I love this series. I think that it is relatively well known within, like, the fantasy booktube community. I've heard a lot of the booktubers that I follow talk about it a lot. That's where I heard about it. In the wider world, I don't think it's very well known at all, which I think is a shame because it's so very different than what I expect from basically all other fantasy that I read, and that's really, really refreshing. The first book in the series reads very different than the rest of the 3. It's basically a big, long, 600-page setup for a trilogy of what the story Ken Liu wanted to actually write was, but the stories that he manages to tell are evocative and beautiful and extremely meaningful, and by the time we get to that last book, we've been spending time with some of these characters for so long, but also he's an author who is not afraid to kill off major characters that you love. And so I do love that. It's an emotionally harrowing journey, but it's fascinating, partially because of the themes that it really focuses on, including things like how to keep your people's identity and culture while continuing to progress, first contact for old societies with a new society from across the ocean, and more than anything else, just invention and the, beauty of the human mind and how it is able to overcome challenges by coming up with new clever ideas. You're going to read more about the specificities of engineering in this series than anything else you have ever read in the fantasy space, I guarantee you, and if that sounds boring to you, I promise you it is not. The way that the author writes about it is so engaging, and it just draws you into the joy that he has in explaining this as well. I think I've said a lot of that before, and I don't know how to keep talking about this. It's one of those series that I wish more people would read because I think it deserves to be read. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. My next book is Spark of the Everflame by Penn Cole. It's the first book in Kindred's Curse series. I love this. I loved it. I picked it up on a whim after I started to read a book that I very much disliked, and this is right up my alley. It's a fantasy story. There's a ton of mystery. There's magic. There's tension. There's political intrigue. It's really fun. I've had a great time reading it. I will say it's very predictable. I have basically read this series before, which I don't hate, but if you are someone who finds that frustrating, definitely don't grab this one. It very much has like an ACOTAR vibe, but to me, I saw it compared to ACOTAR, but to me it's a little bit more similar to Blood and Ashes, very much how that author writes, where there are a lot of miscommunication tropes, there's a lot of secrets and things, and this is one of a lot of secrets. And I'm not normally one who like can guess the secret, but I've pretty much gotten everything here, which could be semi-frustrating, so if just know that picking it up. But I thought it was great. I thought the characters, I really love the characters, and that to me is the biggest thing. If I'm intrigued by the characters, I will read through almost anything to see how they are, see how they go. The world is really fun. The main character, DM, which I think you say DM, I'm not sure that's how I've been saying it in my head. Very strong, powerful character. I love that this generation of fantasy female authors so often is writing a female character that from the get-go can kick butt. Like, this DM has been trained by her father, who is a warrior. She could take on literally anyone. So you're not going to have a like, oh, I'm so weak and here's my training montage. She's already got shit done. She's there. Great. The rest of it is more of the emotional turmoil and figuring out politics. And there's a giant reveal at the end of this book that had me literally finishing it and starting the next one within the next minute, because I simply could not take myself away from this world. I think it's really fun, really easy read. This first one is really fast-paced. I'm very much enjoying the series. If you like ACOTAR, if you like Blood and Ashes, if you like fantasy and romance, this is definitely a great book. 5 stars.
5 stars. All of them are 5 stars.
Mic drop. 5 stars. What's your next one, Robby?
So my last one is my last one. Yeah, this is 5. Is The Butcher's Masquerade by Matt Dinniman. This is part of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. I was gonna do Dungeon Crawler Carl 1, but then I was like, I mean, this is the one I read most recently and the one I did like the most, but really just Dungeon Crawler Carl as a whole. Period. This has been the most pleasant surprise of my year by far. I have not, it's a lit RPG. If you don't know what that is, it is a book where like the characters level up and you can like see their stats and stuff. And I had never read one before. I had heard Dungeon Crawler Carl talked about a lot online, and I was looking for something kind of light and fun to read, and I got way more than I bargained for, and I love it so much, and it's so dumb and funny, but I'm also in the middle of book 6 right now, I think, and it's starting to get much more serious.
Oh no.
But it's just so wonderful to read. I think I've read all of them in less than 72 hours.
Yeah.
The first few are also in particularly very short, and also fun, exciting thing. I think at least the first 3 are now being traditionally published, so you'll be able to find them in bookstores, which is really exciting. Instead of just, I believe they were just on Kindle Unlimited until now. So that's really exciting. So if you've been looking to get into it and you don't like e-readers, you'll be able to find them at your local bookstore sometime in the next few months. I forget exactly when. But anyway, the story follows Carl and his cat, Princess Donut, as they are some of the last survivors of Earth and are thrown into a intergalactic reality show in which they have to do a literal dungeon crawl to try and survive. And that's really the entire setup. It's very irreverent, it's extremely offensive and inappropriate, and it's very, very funny. And yeah, it's great. I am really sad that I'm about to catch up. However, I think book 7 comes out in August, or maybe September or something like that. So
soon enough.
So I'll be able to pick it up again soon. But then after that, I don't know what I'm going to do other than be extremely, extremely sad. So yeah, highly recommend. But I think if you've been watching this channel at all, you've probably continually heard me talk about that series.
And I've continually heard him cackle from the other room whenever he's reading these books.
Yeah,
constantly.
But anyway, and also apparently, I've not actually listened to them, but shout out, apparently the audiobooks are like second to none. So if you like audiobooks, apparently the audiobook narrator for that, like, it's apparently like the best audiobook ever. So I have been told. So if you are ever interested in picking it up, but only like audiobooks, this would absolutely be the one for you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, my last one, you kind of did this, so at first I was like, oh, this is kind of cheating. But I'll pick one. I can't.
You can do it,
I'm
babe.
done with the talking
We're
today.
so close.
Thank you. I want to kind of make it just like this era of the Wheel of Time. But I went with The Shadow Rising. That was the first one I read this year. I gave it 4 stars. I really much enjoyed it. But to be honest, the books have all blended together for the most part. Sure. I'm also never really good at remembering titles of books. I can remember like, oh, that was the second book and this generally happened. But I've read so many of these books now and they're all so thick that they've all kind of run together. Mm-hmm. But I will say my Wheel of Time books that I have read in this year, I have had much more fun reading than when I first started. I really love the characters. I love how much emotional depth we're getting through all of them as the books slow down. There's so much time with all of these characters that I love so much, and they've developed in such a different way, except for Perrin and Fael, but whatever. Yeah. I have a lot of
no one likes
dislike for those kids, unfortunately. But everyone else obsessed, and I just have found myself really looking forward to being in this world when I'm not. can't wait to see what these kids get up to.
Those crazy Two Rivers kids.
I mean, they've gotten up to a lot of stuff.
They really have.
And they've all got like big positions now. Like everyone's got some titles. There's a lot of nonsense happening. And so that would be my fifth book, basically, is...
What?
Generally. I am enjoying it much more than I thought I would, especially when I first started. I was like, what is this? This is hard to read.
Yes.
And now I'm like, oh, I got it. Okay, cool. I see. I've found my way to find my way of reading it, like what I like out of it, which I don't think is necessarily like what the general public gets out of it.
Yeah, that doesn't matter.
I think
as long as you're enjoying it, that's all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm enjoying the parts that I think people would forget.
Great. Fantastic. I love that.
Just who I am. So.
So do you want to talk about your least favorite book?
Yeah, I can't remember what it was called.
I guess I'll go first. And also, big caveat here: these are just our opinions.
Oh yeah.
You know, you may like something that we hate, and you may hate something that we love. So if you know that your taste is the opposite of mine, probably read what I'm about to talk about, and don't read anything I just talked about. But anyway, my least favorite read thus far this year is by far A Court of Thorns and Roses. I really did not have a great time reading that first book. I think that there are just like not a lot happens. The book doesn't have, until the very end, the book I didn't feel like had a ton of identity. And then in the end, a particular character named Rhysand did a bunch of stuff that I really super hated. And like actively. And so yes, I did. I'm not going to go into spoilers here. If you want to hear about me rant about that character, you can watch the video up here or in the description down below. But yeah, so to me it was like kind of a fine book until the end, in which a lot of stuff started happening, but I found I didn't super care about it because it didn't feel like any of it was going to have like meaningful impact in the moment, particularly like the villain of the book. And I just hated Rhysand.
Oh well.
Yeah.
You know, it's so
and
funny.
I know that everyone loves Rhysand so much.
I had the polar opposite experience because I thought the rest, the whole beginning and middle of the book, I was like, whatever.
That's what I said. It was fine.
And then the end of the book, I was like, I have to keep reading.
Oh no! At the end of the book, I went, I think I know where this is going to go, and they said, don't make assumptions, and I was still mostly right. Yeah. Anyway, I did like the second book a lot more.
Ha!
So there's that. But anyway, so that was my dishonorable mention for the year so far.
Okay, so mine, I feel bad about. I very, very rarely don't finish reading books. Because usually...
You DNF'd something.
I DNF'd something.
I don't think I've DNF'd anything since we started the channel.
In a lickety-split.
Well, sometimes you know.
Yeah, I guess. And usually I am one to... Because I will say, there is part of me that's like, I'm curious what happens to these characters. But there was so much of it that I just strongly disliked. The reason I struggle to DNF anything is because I have so often read books that there's something about it that I did end up liking. I did enjoy. I don't think I've ever actively disliked a book and finished it, like the whole time. Like
sure.
Akatar, like I said, the first Akatar book, I truly was not into it until the last 90 pages.
Huh.
But I still there was enough in it to intrigue me, and I'm so glad that I went through with it because I loved Feyre and I loved the world and was so interested and got there. So I have a hard time putting anything away because I'm like, what if it gets me in the end? But this one was just not for me. It was just not for me. I can't even tell. Not really though.
No, sure, for sure.
And this was The Friend Zone by Abby, I'm assuming Jimenez? I'm not sure how you say that. Would you say that? Abby Jimenez?
Maybe.
Jimenez? Everyone has told me to read other ones of her books, which I've heard she's great beach reads, they're great one-off books. I know she has a recent book that's a very summary book. I couldn't get my hands on her most recent book, so I started with one of the first of her series. This is called The Friend Zone. I made it about 20 pages in, and just the characters were not...
Whoa, 20 pages when you DNF'd? Dang!
There was so much that happened.
Yeah.
That I was just like, I just don't think these people are for me. I'm not really into the vibes. I'm not into there was a lot of like shaming of things in an offhand way that reminded me of high school, of like, this guy went on a date with somebody, he's like, she didn't even eat a cheeseburger, she's got too much makeup on, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, this is just gross. And I'm obviously supposed to like this character. There were other likable qualities that he had, but that's just one example. There were a few more other quotes that I was like, it made me feel bad, and it made me kind of shrink into myself and think about the things about me that these characters who aren't real would hate. So I stopped.
Okay.
I
Dang.
stopped. Yeah.
Mhm.
There was the end of one chapter just kind of fumbled down, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm out.
I'm done now.
I'm done. I'm immediately done. So, but I definitely am going to read more books by this author. I've heard great things. I know people love her. So I will definitely be tuning into a few more of her most recent novels.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's it.
I
had a great reading year. I was looking back at the number of books that I've given 5 stars, and I had to like narrow it down for this list, so I was pretty pumped about that.
I've had a great reading summer.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's it from us. I hope you liked our list. What are your favorite and least favorite reads that you've had so far this year? We'd love to talk about them in the comments.
Are there any of the same as ours?
Yeah, if you read anything that we read and had the same or very different opinion, let us know. Please like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching, and
we'll see you on our next adventure.